Hello and welcome back to Tinker Talks Guns. Today we're going to be talking about the Colt 1848 pocket model. Specifically, we're going to be talking about a variant of that has been seriously interfered with. This is, of course, a reproduction. I did not knock about with an actual antique. Now, Colt started production of revolvers in 1836 at the Patterson facility, and the Colt Patterson revolver was the first patented modern-style revolver with a conventional system of operation. And it was a huge failure. They were very expensive, a little fragile, not terribly reliable, and they were available in belt models in 36 caliber and pocket models in, I believe, 31 and 28 caliber. And they were not a success, and Colt went out of business. The Colt Manufacturing Company was resurrected thanks to a contract from Texas for the Walker revolver, which was an enormous 44 caliber horse pistol. In fact, it used a 210 grain pickup bullet over 60 grains of black powder and was quite powerful. It was also huge. And it had its other flaws too. But this enabled Colt to go into production with an improved version, the Dragoon revolvers, in 1847. So they were back in business, but what really kept them in business and allowed them to grow was the 1848 and 1849 pocket models, which they sold combined more of those than all of their other percussion revolvers, which is quite a feat. Now, the 1848, which this represents, was actually introduced in 1847 in 31 caliber and was a 5-shot percussion revolver. The hard and fast dividing line between the 1848 and the 1849 is that the 1849 had a rounded trigger guard. But the 1848 sort of evolved into the 1849. Other than that, the original 1848s had a number of details that were different, and really we should address that in the tabletop. Okay, first things first, we'll unload and show clear. And this is done in a fashion pretty typical of any Colt-style single-action revolver. Bring the hammer to half-cock and rotate the cylinders, looking through the cartridge gate to ensure that there are no cartridges present. So, 31 caliber 5-shot revolver. These were offered with barrels of 3, 4, 5, or 6 inches and were produced from 1847 to around 1850. And they made about 15,000 of them. Later guns were often equipped, as this one originally was, with a loading lever. And on the cylinder, it's hard to make out, but is what's called the Indian fight scene. And these were done by Colt to authenticate the revolver as a Colt rather than a knockoff. They made expensive roll stamps and roll stamped the cylinders with different pictures for different models. This one's called the Indian fight scene. Has little guys on horses trying to kill each other. And this one parts company from other 1848 pocket models in that it has been converted to fire metallic cartridges. In particular, the 32 Smith & Wesson, sometimes now called 32 Smith & Wesson short. And it was not a remarkably powerful cartridge, but it would do the job. And to load it, you simply bring the hammer to half-cock. Note that this is a dummy shell. The primer has been struck, there's no powder in it. And you simply drop it into the cylinder and rinse and repeat until you have all the cylinders loaded. Now in this gun, of course, you only really want to load 4 of the 5 cylinders because you want to lower the hammer on an empty chamber because otherwise, if this is struck, if the hammer is struck, the gun will go off, and there is no safety notch. So, while this is officially a 5-shooter, it's actually more of a 4-shooter. Now, with a cartridge conversion, you can lower the hammer between cylinders, and the firing pin will land between the cartridge rims and keep it from, it can't strike a primer. So you can, this one, now that it's converted to cartridges, can be a 5-shooter. To fire it, once it's loaded, you simply cock the hammer, aim, and squeeze the trigger. Now, on the typical 1849, the rear sight is a notch cut in the top of the hammer. That has been removed on this gun because I have relocated the rear sight to the barrel. And between that and the front post, if the hammer's cocked so you can see it, you actually get a relatively decent sight picture. And try to get that lined up. It's hard because the camera is not in line with my eyes. Anyway, it's a fairly decent sight picture, and in fact, this little gun is pretty accurate when you use the correct bullets, because everybody lies about their caliber. 32 calibers are 31 caliber, a .312 inch diameter bullet. 31 caliber percussion guns are 320 caliber. So you can either use a very soft lead bullet and hope that it fills the grooves, or you can use a hollow base wad cutter, or the third option would be to have a 320 diameter bullet that was heel based to fit in the cartridge. Typically I use hollow base wad cutters, and the hollow base expands from the pressure, fills the rifling, and Bob's your uncle. He's not really, we just tell people that to avoid awkward questions. Anyway, so disassembly of this gun is in typical cap and ball Colt fashion. You pop out the locking key, remove the barrel, and remove the cylinder. Now, this was originally a percussion cylinder. The walls, as you can see, are quite thin, but it's a very low-powered cartridge, so it doesn't really seem to matter. And what I did was I put this in the lathe and turned down the base, removed the nipples, and then turned down the base, and then bored the cylinders through so that the end was exposed, leaving a little ridge here between cylinders to bear against the base plate so that it would, space properly and allow room for the case heads. And then the breech plate is held in place with a couple of pins that are staked in place so that it's permanently mounted to the blast shield, and there is a rebounding firing pin in the breech face. And other than that, the mechanism and everything is just straight up Colt percussion. And I left the 6-inch barrel because I usually like to turn revolvers into snubbies, and this one, it just didn't seem right. What I did do was I recontoured the barrel here, the lug under the barrel that previously held the loading lever. On the standard guns with no loading lever, it comes out to about here and it's just sort of squared off. But I rounded things out nicely to sort of mimic the Avenging Angel style pistols, even though those always had very, very short barrels. It was just an aesthetic touch that I liked. And of course, mounting the sights on the barrel rather than having them on the hammer nose just gives you a little more consistency, a little better sight picture. So this gun does not reproduce any particular cartridge conversion I'm aware of, although the way the breech plate is done and rounded is in the same style as actual period conversions. And as you can see, there is no loading gate. It's just when the hammer's lowered, none of the cartridges are in position to fall out. And in truth, they don't fall out easily while you're operating the revolver, but I wouldn't want to point it up at an angle and cock it very, very slowly, because the cartridge will fall out. Now this is the holster I made for it. It's very simple. This is a style that is referred to as a gun bucket, because you just drop the gun in it and it just holds it, because it sits nice and deep and it's not much inclined to fall out. And it's quite stiff leather. It's actually a bit thicker than a lot of the leather that was used for this sort of use in period, but that's okay. And I have never even, aside from when I was making it, I've never even strung it on a belt. It's just kind of an accessory to the gun. So, there you have it, a pocket pistol that would not fit in any modern pocket I'm aware of because of that 6-inch barrel, but I do really enjoy it. Cartridge conversion revolvers, many of which were actually produced by Colt and technically weren't conversions, have fascinated me for a long time. I very much enjoy creating my own cartridge conversions, and while my fascination with them has largely passed, they're an interesting historical footnote and were at one time very common. And as I say, the 1848 and 1849 pocket models were really the guns that made Colt. They sold enough of them to finance developing things like the 1851 Navy and the 1860 Army, for which they are much more famous. And so they have a place in my heart as well as in history. This one in particular because it's the creature of my own imagination. Anyway, hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Hit notifications because it's me, you never know what's going to happen. And if you feel especially motivated to assist in my endeavors, click the link below in the description and consider supporting me on Patreon. So, I hope this finds you well. Stay safe, take care, and we'll talk to you again real soon.